hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our powerful health tips.
I am 72 years old. My hands have known the weight of grandchildren, grocery bags, and 1,000 quiet sacrifices. And today, our daughter-in-law wanted to evict us from her house. Let me tell you how that moment found me. Henry and I had just finished unloading the last of the boxes into our lake cottage, a dream nearly 4 decades in the making. A place we had talked about in whispers for years, always ending those conversations with one day. Now, finally, one day had become this day. The air smelled like pine needles and damp bark, the kind of scent that sinks into your lungs and makes you breathe a little slower. The light filtered through tall cedars, warm and gold, casting long, sleepy shadows across the front porch. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out across the water, its haunting cry floating like smoke through the trees. Inside, the house still smelled of fresh paint and the faint sweetness of old wood. The floors creaked when he stepped in just the right spot, but not in a broken way, in a way that said, "I've stood here for years, and I'll stand for many more." Henry was unpacking books in the corner, humming some tune he probably didn't even realize he remembered. I stood at the kitchen window, watching sunlight ripple on the surface of the lake, a fresh cup of coffee warming my palms. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind of peace you steal in 5-minute breaks between errands. Not the peace you fake when your family's arguing and you pretend not to hear. This was real, bone deep, earned. Then the phone rang. The old landline sat on the counter, beige and square. Its curly cord still tangled like it had always been in every house we'd ever lived in. Henry glanced at me as I picked it up, and I gave him a small smile, expecting maybe a neighbor calling to say hello. Instead, it was her, Laura, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was brisk, almost cheerful in a way that didn't match the words coming out of her mouth. "Hi, Evelyn. We will be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. with 20 people from my family. Get the rooms ready. We're staying for 2 weeks." Just like that. No greeting, no question, no congratulations on the new place. Just a command dropped like a stone into the middle of our quiet lake. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I stared out the window, trying to make sense of the sentence, as if maybe I'd misheard her, but her voice pressed on. "It's been such a stressful month, and we need the break. The kids want to swim, and my parents are flying in tomorrow. You've got plenty of space, right? Oh, and Travis is bringing his dog. Hope that's okay. We'll bring snacks or something." Henry must have seen my expression shift. He stood up, wiping his hands on a dish towel, and moved toward me. He didn't speak, just placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I turned my head slightly to look at him. His eyes were calm, but not surprised. He knew that voice, knew what it meant. We both did. I brought the phone closer to my mouth, my voice slow and level. "Laura, we just arrived. We haven't even finished unpacking. This is our home now, not a rental property." She laughed light, airy, dismissive. "Exactly. So you're settled in. You don't need all that space for just the two of you. And family helps each other out, right?" That word family. She used it like a velvet rope around the neck. Henry stepped back, ran a hand through his thinning silver hair, and leaned against the door frame. The late afternoon sun had dipped just low enough to cast an amber glow across the wooden floors. I remember thinking how beautiful the house looked in that moment. How warm, how undeserved she sounded in it. I took a long breath. My throat felt dry, not from sadness. Something sharper, like a blade of clarity, had slid into place. I was silent on the phone. She was silent, as if surprised that I didn't resist. "Great. See you soon," she chirped, then hung up before I could say another word. The line went dead, but the air in the kitchen felt heavier than before. Thicker, like it had absorbed the residue of her entitlement. I set the phone down. My hand lingered on the receiver. Henry walked over slowly, picked up one of the mugs we hadn't unpacked yet, and filled it with cold water from the tap. He handed it to me wordlessly. When I looked at him, he gave me that half-smile of his. The one I'd fallen in love with before the kids, before the mortgages, before all the years of being overlooked. "You've got something up your sleeve, don't you?" asked his voice low. I nodded slowly, a small flame blooming in my chest. I do. We sat down at the little dining table by the window. It wasn't even fully assembled yet. Henry had only just tightened the bolts that morning, but it held our weight. And more importantly, it held our silence. A peaceful kind of silence, not avoidance, not resentment, just two people thinking together. I thought about all the times I'd been spoken to. Like I was staff, not family. Don't come for Christmas if you're not going to help cook. The kids only like certain foods now. Please don't bring your classic casseroles. We're doing a grown-upson party this year. Hope you understand. And every time I swallowed it for the sake of keeping peace, for the sake of being nearby, for the sake of my son who never once stood up for me. But this house, this place, this was sacred ground. Ours, not a free vacation lodge, not a dumping ground for other people's chaos. Henry slid a notepad toward me. I found a pen. We made a list. Hotel reservations, check. Suitcases by the door, check. A neatly printed rental contract, check. A smile, check. The last one was mine. If Laura wanted hospitality, I'd give her the kind she couldn't recognize. Outside, the sky was starting to fade into soft streaks of pink and lavender. The lake shimmered beneath it, rippling like brushed silk. Henry reached over and took my hand. "Do you think they'll get the message?" he asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "Maybe not," I said. "But that's not why we're doing it." He nodded. We sat there for a while longer, not speaking, just listening to the soft creaks of the cottage settling into its new life, into our life. We were ready. But tonight it was just us, and it was enough. I didn't sleep that night, not because of discomfort. The bed was soft and freshly made. The wooden frame creaked gently with every breath. Henry took beside me. Outside, the lake was still, disturbed only by the distant cry of a lawn and the slow rustle of wind slipping through pine branches. It was peaceful, and yet peace didn't reach me. My mind churned quietly like the old washing machine we had in our first house, constant humming, unresolved. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the tree branches sway across it like slow-moving ghosts. The smell of pine and old wood surrounded me, normally a comfort. But tonight it felt like a mask stretched too tightly over old wounds. Laura's voice echoed in my head, not just from earlier that day, but from every year that came before it. She didn't need to shout. Her voice was her tool. Always firm, always efficient, always just this side of impolite, like she was handling a task she resented, but one she thought she had to manage. I remembered a day 10 years ago. It was our first Thanksgiving at her house. I had brought my sweet potato casserole, my signature dish, the one people used to ask me to make, the kind with the brown sugar and pecan topping, slightly crisped. As I stepped through the front door, still holding the warm dish wrapped in a towel, Laura barely glanced up. "Oh," she said flatly, "we don't really do heavy sides anymore. The kids are trying to eat cleaner." That was it. No thank you. No smile. She turned and walked back to the kitchen. The dish never even made it to the table. I remember standing there in the hall, holding it like it was a dead bird I didn't know what to do with. My son, already nursing a beer, gave me a weak smile and a shrug. I took it back to the car, still warm in my hands. That was the beginning. Over time, the little slights started to pile up, like thin layers of dust that no one noticed but me. At Christmas one year, I arrived with carefully chosen gifts for the grandkids. I'd wrapped them in paper covered in snowmen and tied them with ribbon. Laura met me at the door, took them from my hands, and said, "Thanks. I'll sort through these later. They already have too much stuff." I didn't. See the kids open them. I wasn't even sure if they ever did. Another time before a family cookout, she called me and said, "Just bring napkins or paper plates. Don't worry about food." That was her way of drawing the line of saying, "You're not needed. Not in the way you used to be." She spoke to me like I was an extra, background noise. Her eyes would skin past me at gatherings like she was already on to the next thing. If I sat in the living room, she'd talk over me, filling that space with updates and plans that excluded me. If I suggested something, a recipe, a movie for the kids, an idea for an outing, she'd say, "Oh, we tried that already." Or, "They've outgrown that." And always, my son said nothing. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed. Other times, I feared he'd notice and didn't care. I remembered one summer when Henry was recovering from surgery. He was weak and pale, but the hospital staff said he was doing well. I spent hours at his bedside, keeping track of his medication, adjusting his pillows, reading to him even when his eyes stayed closed. I sent a text to Laura, letting her know. She never replied. Weeks later, when we saw her at a birthday party, she said, "Oh, sorry. It's just been crazy around here. You know how it is." No, I didn't, because I would never ignore someone like that. Not someone I claimed was family. Even the way she said my name grated on me. Evelyn. So clipped. So formal. Never. With softness. Never Mom or even a friendly nickname. Just Evelyn. Like I was a lady who lived 2 doors down and sometimes showed up uninvited. There were no shouting matches, no dramatic scenes. Just a steady erosion, a quiet dismissal, a series of cold shoulders wrapped in polite smiles. And somehow I tolerated it. I excused it. I told myself she was busy, tired, overwhelmed. I convinced myself that if I just kept showing up, she'd eventually see that I wasn't trying to be a burden. But the more I gave, the less I seemed to matter. Once I offered to babysit for a weekend. Laura told me that's sweet, but we already have a sitter the kids know. Another time I made a scarf for her birthday. She left it on the counter the whole evening and never mentioned it again. Then there were the holidays. The plans were always decided without us. We were told when to come, what to bring, where to sit. If we stayed too long, there were glances. If we left early, we were told, "Oh, you missed the fun part." She once said, "We like to keep things modern. You know, not so old-fashioned." That one stayed with me. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, like she was gently closing a door in my face over and over again. Even the kids seemed to pick up on it. They were polite but distant, like I was someone they were told to hug, not someone they rushed toward. I tried to be cheerful, to bring little games and stories, to make pancakes in funny shapes like I used to. But there was always a screen on, always a schedule, always something more important. And yet Henry and I kept saying yes, because we loved our son, because we hoped each time that it would be different, that Laura would surprise us with warmth or at least acknowledgement. She never did. So when the phone rang in the lake cottage and I heard her say, "We'll be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. There will be 20 of us." It wasn't the words that shocked me. It was what they revealed. She hadn't changed. She still saw us as pieces on her board. Our new home wasn't a new chapter to her. It was a convenient free rental. She didn't ask how we were settling in. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't ask if it was a good time. She just expected, assumed, claimed. I lay there in the dark, the air cool against my skin, the soft hum of frogs rising from the trees below. My hands were still resting on the blanket, but inside something burned. It wasn't rage. Not really. It was exhaustion, resentment, a quiet, pulsing ache that said enough. Henry shifted in his sleep beside me. I turned to look at him. His face was peaceful, steady. He had always known. He had always waited. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded barefoot across the wooden floor. I opened the window and let the scent of pine and lake water drift in. Somewhere across the water, a fish leapt and splashed. The sky was deep blue with stars blinking through the canopy. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the night. Tomorrow Laura would arrive with her bags and her plans. But the door she thought she could walk through wouldn't be open because I wasn't the same woman she used to talk over. Not anymore. The morning came dressed in a thin layer of fog, soft and cool like breath on a mirror. Dee clung to every blade of grass, and the trees stood tall and damp, their trunks darkened with moisture. The lake below was perfectly still, its surface like polished stone, mirroring the gray sky overhead. It was the kind of quiet that asked to be preserved. I stood at the kitchen window, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The steam rose gently, catching the early light that spilled through the curtains, but the warmth didn't reach me. My chest felt heavy, my shoulders drawn in. Sleep had not come easy, and the weight of it was coming pressed against me like a wet coat. Henry moved quietly behind me, folding the last of our clothes into the overnight bags we'd packed the night before. The soft sipping of fabric was the only sound inside the cottage. "They'll be here soon," he said, his voice steady. I nodded without turning. The plan was simple, but it carried the weight of years. We had printed the rental contract the day before at the library in town. It looked official enough, names, dates, a line for check-in at 10 a.m. It didn't need to be perfect. It only needed to make her pause. What still echoed in my mind wasn't the words Laura had spoken on the phone. It was her tone. It had always been her tone. Sharp, dismissive, dipped in sugar, but always cold underneath. She spoke as if the world rearranged itself around her convenience. We'll be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. There will be 20 of us. Get the rooms ready. That sentence had rolled over everything Henry and I had built together. It reminded me of something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16 when my father first looked at me and said, "If you can't follow simple rules, maybe you don't belong here." I had come home late. From a friend's house. I hadn't called. It was a mistake. But he didn't want to hear apologies. He wanted silence and obedience. So I packed a small bag and spent the week at my aunt's, heartbroken but oddly relieved. I learned then that distance could be a kind of peace. Laura's words had the same sting, the same assumption that she could make decisions that didn't involve asking, that my role was to accept, prepare, and get out of the way. The air inside the cottage smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the cinnamon muffins I had baked the day before. I had imagined a soft first week here. Quiet mornings, warm mugs, soft chairs, shared books, but the bags at the door said otherwise. Henry placed the contract carefully on the dining table. He glanced out the front window. I followed his gaze. The road was still empty, winding down through the trees like a ribbon laid across the earth. But soon we knew it would fill with noise, footsteps, demands. The last time Laura visited us uninvited, she had walked through the door and immediately said, "You haven't rearranged the furniture since the last time. It would make more sense to move that chair to the corner." It wasn't a suggestion. It never was. She never asked how I was. Never noticed when I lost weight during Henry's illness. Never remembered my birthday unless reminded. Even when I wore that blue sweater, she complimented once, hoping it would warm things up between us. She looked through me like I was glass. Once at a cookout, she told someone, "Evelyn's great with the kids as long as you tell her exactly what to do." That had stung. I had smiled, but my fingers tightened around the paper plate I was holding until it bent. So, today I wasn't going to smile. I wasn't going to ask how long they were staying or where they wanted to sleep. We had packed our car that morning, a cooler, our bags, 2 folding chairs, and a book each. We were heading to a small lakeside in just over the hill, a room with a fireplace and no interruptions. At 9:15 a.m., I watched a trail of cars roll down the gravel road. Tires crunching, engines humming, doors opening in succession like dominoes. Laughter, shouting, footsteps on stone, and then her voice. "Okay, everyone out. No running inside." The screen door creaked open before I even stepped away from the kitchen. Laura swept in, sunglasses on top of her head, hair tied up, clipboard in one hand. She didn't greet us. Her eyes immediately scanned the room. "Okay, the kids will sleep here. My parents can take the main bedroom. Travis and Emily need to be near the bathroom for the baby. Evelyn, where's the folding bed?" I didn't move. Henry stepped forward and handed her the rental agreement. She blinked confused. Took it. "Read." "What is this?" "The cottage is rented out starting today," Henry said, his voice calm. "We're handing over the keys at 10 o'clock. She looked up at him, then at me. Her mouth moved, but no sound came for a moment. "But I told you we were coming. We made plans. You told us." I replied evenly. "You didn't ask." Her expression flickered. She looked back at the paper, then at the bags by the door. "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said. More doors opened outside. Someone asked where to bring the coolers. "Stop unloading," she snapped. "Just wait." She stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. "Why are you doing this? We always stay together." The kids were excited. I felt the burn behind my eyes, but I didn't let it rise because this is our home. And today we chose to protect it. She blinked. "We could have figured it out. You didn't have to do this." I tilted my head. "And you didn't have to assume we'd be fine with it." There was a silence that stretched too long. In that moment, I thought of saying more, of listing everything, of reminding her of the years of small cuts that had left scars, the ignored messages, the whispered criticisms, the eye rolls, the days she made me feel like I was in the way. I thought about saying I paid for your wedding dress. I stayed with your children so you could have weekends off. I made meals, cleaned up, stayed quiet, and you still made me feel like I was never enough. But I said none of it because she wouldn't hear it. Instead, I stepped toward the door. Henry held it open. The cool air wrapped around us like a blanket. The sun had started to break through the clouds, lighting up the water in soft sparkles. We walked to the car without looking back. Where are we supposed to go? She called after us. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her one. Henry started the engine. The soft purr felt like a drum beat in my chest. As we pulled away, I saw her standing on the porch, still holding the contract, not angry, not yelling, just caught off guard. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. As we turned onto the main road, I reached for Henry's hand. He took it without a word. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Finally, the trees parted around us and the lake glimmered beyond. This time we had chosen ourselves, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, and the silence that followed was the kind I had waited years to hear. She started calling that same evening. The phone vibrated on the nightstand, lighting up the dim room with her name glowing on the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the soft shadows flicker across the ceiling from the fireplace. Outside, a light rain fell, tapping rhythmically against the inn's window panes, almost like the sky itself had something it wanted to say. Henry looked up from his book. I met his gaze and gave a small shake of the head. He nodded and we said, nothing more. A few minutes later, a message arrived. Evelyn, what happened? Everyone's confused. Please call me. The glow from the screen dimmed and disappeared. Silence returned. Not the heavy silence of tension. This one felt deliberate, chosen. It filled the room like warm air fills a quilt. Still, I lay awake that night, my body still, but my mind sifting through every word, every look, every moment of dismissal from Laura. In the low amber light of the inn's bedside lamp, I could still see the look on her face from that morning. Shock, not pain, not regret, just disbelief. The kind of disbelief someone wears when their authority is questioned. She hadn't expected resistance. Not from me. She thought we were hers to arrange, as if Henry and I were an empty room she could decorate with her own noise. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and let my eyes drift across the ceiling beams. The smell of cedar was rich in the air, grounded and earthy. Every knot in the wood above me reminded me of a choice made, a tree, shaped by its storms. In that stillness, the word she'd said days before came back to me. Honestly, we thought you'd want the company. You and Henry always seem a little alone. As if peace was a flaw, as if simplicity was a sign of lacking. The next morning, more messages. Evelyn, are you okay? The kids are upset. They were really looking forward to this. Can you just explain what happened? We feel blindsided. This feels a bit extreme. I don't know what I did to deserve this. That last one, read it twice. What she did, I could have listed every time she cut me off mid-sentence. Like when I tried to show her an old family photo of her husband as a child. She glanced at it for a split second and said, he hates how he looked back then. Let's not embarrass him. Or when she asked me to stop bringing snacks for the kids to our visits. We're trying to be more conscious about sugar, she had said while passing out frosted cupcakes from a store. I remembered one Thanksgiving, when she decided everyone should share a gratitude moment. Each person shared something meaningful. When it was my turn, I started to speak about how thankful I was for a second chance at life after Henry's health scare. She cut in and said, oh, let's keep it light, Evelyn. This is supposed to be fun. Everyone laughed awkwardly. I smiled and swallowed it. Now I knew better. Henry and I spent that day walking the forest trail behind the inn. The morning sun broke through the trees and patches, turning the fallen leaves into a carpet of gold and rust. The smell of damp earth filled the air, fresh and grounding. We stopped by the lake's edge and watched the water ripple gently against the rocks. A heron stood on one leg in the reeds, still as stone. We didn't speak of the phone calls, but they didn't stop. Later that evening, another message came in. I don't understand how you could do this to your own family. And then this has caused a lot of stress. The kids cried. My parents had to drive 3 hours back. Then finally, honestly, you embarrassed us. That was the truth of it. She wasn't sorry for how we felt. She was upset that we had interrupted her story, that her guests had seen her lose control. I sat by the fireplace again that night, cradling a mug of chamomile tea between my pawns. Henry had already fallen asleep in the armchair, his book resting on his chest. The fire popped softly, casting orange light across the rug. Do I feel bad? The question came into my mind like a whisper. I thought about it, let it sit, turned it over in my hands. Sad, yes, but not guilty because I had not been cruel. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't even told her what she had done. I had simply refused to keep giving pieces of myself to someone who only saw me as an extension of their comfort. And that was what made it so loud, so final. She couldn't fix it with one phone call. Couldn't talk over it, couldn't smile through it. She had to sit in it. I remembered one more moment. Small but sharp. 2 years ago, after we had hosted her children for a weekend, she came to pick them up. They were laughing, carrying the little pine cone creatures we had made together. She barely looked at them. Make sure they have all their clothes. Last time something was missing. That was all she said. Not thank you. Not how was your weekend. Just a reminder that I could be useful, but not appreciated. This time I had chosen to be neither. The fourth day at the end, the leaves had started to turn more boldly. Bright reds now streaked the trees, a quiet declaration of change. That morning, another message. Evelyn, I think we need to talk. Maybe in person. I just want to clear the air. There was no apology, no recognition of harm, just control, reshaped to look like concern. I turned off my phone. The day passed slowly, peacefully. Henry and I read by the lake. We watched clouds shift and birds dive. We held hands like we used to back before life got so noisy. That evening, as the stars came out, I felt something new. Not triumph, not revenge, just space. A clean space where guilt used to live. I had nothing to explain, and for the first time in years, that was enough. The silence didn't last. By the end of the first week, my phone began buzzing again. This time it wasn't Laura. First came a short message from my son. Mom, can we talk? 3 words. Simple, polite, but somehow heavier than anything else so far. He had never called to ask before. Usually it was Laura speaking for both of them. Coordinating, deciding, telling. The fact that he had reached out alone, just him, was enough to make me pause. I didn't answer, not because I was angry, but because I needed him to sit with what silence felt like. For years, I had been the one to bridge the gap, to send the messages, to soften the silence. Not this time. By day 10, I had a voicemail. His voice was uncertain. Hey, Mom. I know you're probably upset. I just wanted to say I didn't know about the trip until the morning of. Laura made all the plans. I should have checked in. I'm sorry. There was a pause. I miss you. So do the kids. I listened to that message more than once. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I wanted to believe it was sincere. I sat on the porch of the inn wrapped in a thick wool blanket, the smell of pine and smoke from a nearby chimney drifting on the air. The trees around me were turning fast now, deep reds and golden yellows, painting the forest in warm firelight. Henry was inside reading, his glasses sliding down. His nose, the soft ticking of the fireplace clock, barely audible through the open door. I thought about calling back, but I didn't. Not yet. Because even though I missed them, the sound of my grandchildren's laughter, the stories, the birthdays, I had to be sure. I had to know that my absence had meant something, that my silence had weight. 2 days later, a message from Laura. We understand now that we overstepped. We didn't mean to make you feel excluded. I didn't realize how important the cottage was to you. I hope we can move past this. No apology, no ownership, just a soft attempt to sweep dust under a rug. But the rug had been lifted. The dust was in the air. I set the phone down and stepped into the quiet trail that ran behind the inn. The path was covered in fallen leaves, and every step was a soft crunch. The air was cool, but not sharp, the kind of cold that woke you up gently. I thought about all the things Laura had said over the years. Small words, simple phrases, but every one of them had chipped at my sense of place. We're doing something more modern this year. You understand, right? The kids don't really connect with those old traditions. Maybe let them skip the story this time. Oh, Evelyn, don't trouble yourself with all that. You should just relax. That last one always rang false because it was never said with warmth. It was code for stay out of the way. Now the world around me spoke differently. The trees didn't rush me. The birds didn't interrupt. The wind didn't correct my words. Back at the inn, a woman from the front desk handed me a small envelope one afternoon. For you, she said with a kind smile. It was a card from a couple who had stayed in the cottage the week before. Strangers. They wrote, "We wanted to thank you for letting us stay in your beautiful home." It felt like peace had been built into the walls. We could feel the love. I don't know who you are, but I hope you know you've created something special. I read those words over and cried because somehow strangers had seen the value in what I had made, in what Henry and I had built without expectation, without entitlement. That was when I knew I could forgive. But I didn't need to go back to being invisible to do it. On the 15th day, we returned to the cottage. It was just as we left it, quiet, clean, waiting. Henry opened the door. The scent of home, wood, fabric, a hint of cinnamon, wrapped around us like a welcome. We unpacked slowly. No rush, no noise. And that evening, as the sky turned soft with dusk, I turned my phone back on. More messages. A long one from Laura listing how hurt they had felt, how confusing it had all been, how the kids kept asking why Grandma was mad. I didn't respond to that one. I sent one message to my son. You're always welcome here, but not with assumptions, not with demands. I need to be treated like a person, not a background. I love you. I always have, but I won't disappear to keep the peace. He replied a few hours later. I understand. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I want to do better. That was enough. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. And as the stars appeared over the lake and Henry handed me a cup of warm tea, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. I felt seen. To anyone listening who's ever been pushed to the edges, told to shrink, or spoken over, let me tell you something. Age is not about weakness. It's about dignity. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. You matter, even when others forget. Don't be afraid to choose yourself, even if it means silence.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our powerful health tips. Thanks for watching.